Taman stood at the command center window and watched his world burn. The crystalline cities of Kepler 442b's moon glowed red as Vorth bioships rained death from above. Each explosion sent shock waves through the ground beneath his feet. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Eastern Defense Grid," Lieutenant Hyojin reported from her station. Her voice stayed steady, but Taman could see the fear in her glowing eyes. The Vallani had fought this war for 300 years, and they were losing. Taman's tall, crystal-like body reflected the light from the burning city. His people were ancient and wise, with technology that could bend energy itself to their will. But it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough against the Vorth swarm. The enemy ships looked like giant insects made of living metal. They bred faster than anyone could kill them. They ate entire planets and grew stronger. Every weapon used against them only taught them how to defend better. The Vorth had already consumed 90% of the galaxy. "How many ships do we have left?" Taman asked. Hyojin checked her display. 47 fighters and 12 frigates, sir." "The flagship Dawn's Light is heavily damaged." Taman closed his eyes. When this war started, the Vallani Empire had controlled 12 star systems. Now they had one moon and less than 50 ships. The reports from across the galaxy were all the same. The Thornaki Republic had fallen last month. The Mesh Collective's hive cities were empty ruins. Even the mighty Zephyrian war clans, who had never lost a battle in 1,000 years, were scattered and broken. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're getting reports from the Meridian sector. The Vorth have broken through the last defense line there too." Taman nodded. He had expected this. The galaxy was dying one world at a time. Soon there would be nothing left but the endless hunger of the swarm. A massive explosion shook the command center. Through the window, Taman saw one of their defense platforms break apart. Pieces of metal and crystal fell like rain onto the city below. "They're preparing for the final assault," Hyojin said, studying her sensors. "I'm reading movement from their main fleet. Estimated time until they reach our position is 4 hours. 4 hours. Taman thought about all the things that would end in 4 hours. His people. His culture. The last free city in the galaxy. The Vorth would consume it all, just like they had consumed everything else. He opened a communication channel to all remaining defenders. "This is Commander Taman to all units. The enemy will reach us soon. We cannot win this fight. We all know this. But we can choose how our story ends. We can die as free beings fighting for what we believe in. We will not make it easy for them." The responses came back quickly. Every ship captain, every ground commander, every soldier said the same thing. They would fight to the last breath. Taman was about to close the channel when Hyojin grabbed his arm. "Sir, wait. I'm detecting something strange." She pointed to her sensor display. New contacts were appearing at the edge of the star system. Ships dropping out of hyperspace in formation. But the energy signatures were wrong. "These weren't Vorth bioships. Are those Zephyrian vessels?" Taman asked. Hyojin shook her head. "No, sir. The power readings are completely different. Very primitive fusion drives. Basic metal construction. But there are so many of them." More and more ships appeared on the display. Hundreds, then thousands. They moved in tight formation, heading straight for the battle zone. Taman had never seen ships like these. They looked crude and simple, like something an early spaceflight civilization might build. "Are they friendly?" someone asked. Before anyone could answer, a transmission came through on all frequencies. The voice spoke in an unknown language, but the universal translator worked slowly to make sense of it. "Unknown ships, this is Admiral Park of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress beacon. Please identify yourselves and your situation." Terran? Taman had never heard of that species. He looked at Hyojin, who was already searching the galactic database. "Nothing in our records, sir. No species called Terrans. No planet called Terra." Taman activated his communicator. "Admiral Park, this is Commander Taman of the Vallani Defense Forces. We are under attack by the Vorth swarm. Our situation is critical." "Who are you?" "Where did you come from?" The reply came quickly. The translator had worked out more of the language now. "We're from a planet called Earth on the outer rim of the galaxy. We picked up distress signals from all over. Looks like you folks could use some help." "Help?" Taman almost laughed. These primitive ships with their basic weapons wanted to help against the Vorth? The enemy that had defeated every advanced civilization in the galaxy? "Admiral Park," Taman said carefully. "I appreciate your offer, but you don't understand what you're facing. The Vorth swarm has consumed entire star empires. They cannot be defeated. You should leave while you still can. There was a pause. Then Admiral Park's voice came back, and Taman could hear something in it. Not fear, not doubt. Something else. Something Taman hadn't heard in a very long time. Commander, we've looked at your tactical data. We can see the odds. But we didn't come all this way just to turn around and leave. We've got some experience with impossible situations. On the sensor display, the human fleet was spreading out into attack formation. Their ships were small compared to Vorth bioships, and their weapons looked ancient. But they moved with purpose and discipline. Besides, Admiral Park continued, we brought friends. More ships dropped out of hyperspace. Different designs, but all with the same crude metal construction and primitive drives. The sensor display showed 50,000 vessels now, all heading toward the battle. Heejin stared at her instruments. Sir, where did they all come from? How did they build so many ships so quickly? Taman didn't know. But as he watched the human fleet take position between his dying city and the approaching Vorth swarm, he felt something he thought was gone forever. Hope. All Villani units, he broadcast to his remaining forces. New allies have arrived. Prepare to coordinate with Terran Defense Fleet vessels. We're not done fighting yet. The Vorth bioships began moving faster, sensing the new threat. In a few hours, the galaxy would learn what happened when humans went to war. Taman gripped his command chair and prepared for battle. For the first time in 300 years, the defenders weren't alone. Admiral Park looked out from the bridge of the TDF Incheon at the massive Vorth fleet ahead. The bioships moved like a living wall of death, each one the size of a city. His tactical officer, Captain So Young, stood beside him with a datapad full of bad news. The numbers don't look good, Admiral, So Young said. We're counting over 10 million enemy vessels. We have 50,000. That's 200 to 1 odds, Park nodded. He had seen the calculations already. By every military standard he knew this battle was impossible to win. But humans had won impossible battles before. What's the status of our special weapons? He asked. Engineer Dong Hyun looked up from his station. The modified warheads are ready, sir. Every ship in the fleet has been equipped with them. If your theory is correct about those rare Earth elements, it will work, Park said firmly. Earth is full of elements that are poison to these creatures. We tested it on the specimens we found. The human fleet was spread across space in formations that would have looked strange to any galactic military commander. Instead of the long-range energy duels that most species preferred, the humans were arranging themselves for close combat. Very close combat. Park activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Admiral Park. You all know why we're here. 6 months ago, we received distress signals from across the galaxy. Entire civilizations crying out for help. Well, help has arrived. He paused, looking at the massive enemy force ahead. These Vorth think they're unstoppable because they've only fought civilizations that play by their rules. Long-range energy weapons, predictable tactics, advanced AI systems they can adapt to, but they've never fought humans. On his display, Park could see the Vorth fleet beginning to move. The bioships spread out like a net, preparing to surround and consume the small human force. It was the same tactic they had used to destroy 1,000 worlds. Remember, we're not here to fight fair, Park continued. We're here to win. Use every dirty trick you know. These things killed billions of innocent people. Show them what Earth's children are made of. The first Vorth bioships opened fire with energy beams that could cut through the strongest shields, but the human ships didn't even try to block them. Instead, they scattered in all directions, moving in patterns that seemed random but weren't. Wing Commander Jin-A led the first attack run in her fighter squadron. The small ships dove straight into the Vorth formation, weaving between the massive bioships like birds flying through a forest. This is crazy, her wingman said over the radio. We're flying right into their teeth. That's the point, Jin-A replied. They expect us to keep our distance. Let's show them how wrong they are. Her fighter carried a single modified nuclear warhead filled with rare Earth elements. The Vorth had never encountered these materials before because Earth was one of the few planets rich in them. To humans, they were just common mining materials. To the Vorth, they were deadly poison. Jin-A's fighter slipped through the defensive fire and slammed into the side of a bioship. The explosion was small compared to the giant creature's size, but the rare Earth material spread through its body like acid. The bioship writhed and began to break apart from the inside. Across the battlefield, other human fighters were doing the same thing. They flew their ships like missiles, crashing directly into enemy vessels and detonating their special weapons at close range. It was suicide, but it was working. Captain So Young watched the tactical display with amazement. Admiral, we're actually hurting them. The bioships are pulling back from our fighter attacks. But Park wasn't celebrating yet. Order the main fleet to advance. Full speed. Get us into close range. The larger human ships began moving toward the enemy. These were converted cargo haulers and civilian transports, not proper warships. But they were loaded with nuclear missiles and kinetic railguns that fired solid metal projectiles at incredible speed. The Vorth responded with their standard tactics. Energy beams lashed out at the approaching human ships. Several vessels exploded immediately, but for every ship that died, 10 more kept coming. They're not stopping, So Young observed. The humans just keep advancing no matter how many we lose. This was something new in the Vorth's experience. Other species retreated when they took heavy casualties. They tried to preserve their forces and find better positions, but humans seemed willing to trade ship for ship, even when they were outnumbered. A group of human destroyers reached the Vorth line and opened fire with their railguns. The solid metal slugs punched through bioship hulls like they were made of paper. Nuclear missiles followed, carrying their payload of toxic, rare earth elements deep into the creatures' bodies. For the first time in 300 years, the Vorth began to retreat. Park watched the enemy pulling back and allowed himself a small smile. All ships pursue the enemy. Don't let them regroup. But the battle wasn't over. The Vorth were learning, adapting their tactics to counter these new weapons. Bioships began linking together in defensive clusters, sharing their energy shields to protect against human attacks. Sir, Dong-hyun called out, the enemy is changing their formation. They're adapting to our tactics. Then we adapt too, Park replied. Order the fleet to break into smaller groups. Hit and run attacks. Make them chase us. The human fleet split apart into dozens of small task forces. Each group attacked from a different direction, forcing the Vorth to spread their defenses thin. When the enemy concentrated on one group, the others would strike from behind. Jin-A led another attack run, this time targeting what looked like a command ship in the center of the Vorth formation. Her fighter was damaged and leaking air, but she pressed on. Jin-A, pull back, her squadron leader ordered. Your ship won't make it. The mission will, she replied, pushing her failing fighter toward the massive bioship ahead. Her final attack destroyed a creature that controlled an entire section of the Vorth fleet. Suddenly, hundreds of enemy ships lost coordination and began firing on each other. On the Vallani moon, Commander Taiman watched the battle in amazement. How are they doing it? Their ships are so primitive compared to ours. Lieutenant Hyejin studied the tactical data. They're not fighting like any species we've ever seen, sir. They don't care about losses. They just keep attacking until something breaks. The battle raged for 12 hours. When it ended, both fleets had taken heavy damage. But for the first time in centuries, the Vorth swarm had been forced to withdraw from a battle they should have won easily. Admiral Park stood in his damaged bridge, reading casualty reports. They had lost 15,000 ships and crews, but they had saved the Vallani moon and proven that the Vorth could be beaten. Admiral, So Young said, we're receiving communications from all over the galaxy. Other species want to know how we did it. Park looked out at the stars where other civilizations were hiding, waiting to see if hope was real again. Tell them, he said, that the humans have arrived, and we're just getting started. General Kyung-ho walked through the military camp on New Silla, watching human soldiers train alongside alien refugees. 3 months had passed since the victory at Kepler 442b, and word was spreading across the galaxy. The Vorth could be beaten. The base was built from simple materials, nothing fancy. Humans preferred things that worked, rather than things that looked impressive. Metal buildings, dirt roads, and practical equipment filled the compound. It was very different from the crystal cities of the Vallani or the floating platforms of the Thornaki. General, the new recruits are ready for inspection, said Colonel Sung-min, approaching with a data pad. We have volunteers from 12 different species. They all want to learn human fighting methods. Kyung-ho nodded. This was happening all over liberated space. Alien survivors were coming out of hiding, desperate to join the fight against the Vorth, but first, they had to learn how humans did things. At the training ground, a mixed group of soldiers was practicing what humans called combined arms tactics. Vallani energy weapons fired alongside human railguns. Thornaki fighters used human camouflage techniques, Even proud Zephyrian warriors were learning to fight in coordinated teams instead of single combat. Remember, Sungmin called out to the trainees, the enemy expects you to fight alone with fancy weapons. We fight together with simple weapons that work. Dr. Mi-young worked in her laboratory on the other side of the base. She was Earth's best expert on alien biology, and she had spent months studying captured Vorth specimens. What she found changed everything humans thought they knew about the enemy. The Vorth aren't just mindless killers, she explained to Kyung-ho during his daily briefing. They're actually very intelligent. But they all think the same way. They share one giant mind across their entire species. Kyung-ho studied the biological samples through the microscope. The Vorth tissue looked like a mix of metal and living cells. How does this help us fight them? Think about it, Mi-young said. Every military in the galaxy has been trying to outthink the Vorth. But you can't outthink something that has millions of brains working together. However, you can confuse it. She showed him video recordings from recent battles. Look at how they react when we do something unexpected. They freeze for several seconds while their collective mind processes the new information. That's when we hit them hardest. Across the base, communications specialist Junho was working on an even more important discovery. He had been studying Vorth communication signals, trying to understand how their collective mind worked. I think I've found their weakness, he told Kyung-ho excitedly. The Vorth coordinate through bioelectrical signals like a massive brain. But just like any brain, if you disrupt the signals, the whole system gets confused. Junho's research had revealed that the Vorth swarm operated like a giant insect colony. Individual Vorth creatures couldn't think for themselves. They only followed instructions from the collective mind. But humans had learned how to jam those instructions. We tested it on a small group of captured Vorth, Junho explained. When we blocked their communication signals, they just stopped moving. They didn't know what to do without orders from the collective. This information was sent to human fleets across the galaxy. Soon every ship carried communication jammers alongside their weapons. The results were immediate and dramatic. Colonel Sungmin led the first major offensive using these new tactics. His mixed human-alien force attacked a Vorth-occupied system called Meridian Prime. The plan was simple but effective. First, human electronic warfare specialists jammed the Vorth communication network. The enemy ships stopped their coordinated attacks and began moving randomly. Then small teams of soldiers used human guerrilla tactics to attack key targets. Remember what we learned on Earth, Sungmin told his troops. Hit them where they're weakest, then disappear before they can respond. Make them angry and confused. Angry enemies make mistakes. The battle for Meridian Prime lasted 3 days. The humans and their alien allies used every dirty trick they could think of. Booby traps, ambush attacks, false retreats, and psychological warfare. They played recordings of human music and poetry on loudspeakers, reminding enslaved populations that freedom was still possible. On Earth, President Yoon-ji addressed the United Nations in an emergency session. The discovery of galactic civilization had changed everything for humanity. There was no hiding anymore. Earth was part of a larger universe, and that universe needed help. My fellow humans, she said, we have revealed ourselves to a galaxy in crisis. Billions of intelligent beings are counting on us to help them survive. We cannot turn our backs on them now. She announced the Great Migration, a massive program to send human volunteers to every liberated world. Colony ships would carry doctors, teachers, engineers, and soldiers to help rebuild destroyed civilizations. We will not let the galaxy fall into darkness again, President Yoon-ji declared. Wherever there is suffering, wherever there is need, humans will be there to help. The first major test of this promise came at the Battle of Arcturus Station. A joint fleet of human and alien vessels commanded by Admiral Park faced the largest Vorth force yet encountered. Over 1 million bioships guarded a major breeding world where the enemy created new warriors. The fleet included ships from dozens of species, but they all used human tactics now. Instead of the formal energy duels that had characterized galactic warfare for centuries, they fought like humans. Fast, dirty, and with complete disregard for military tradition. Villani ships fired energy weapons in coordinated barrages designed by human tacticians. Thornaki fighters used human stealth techniques to approach enemy vessels undetected. Zephyrian warriors, once proud individualists, worked in teams using human small unit tactics. This is Admiral Park to all ships, came the familiar voice over the communication system. The enemy ahead of us has destroyed 100 worlds. They've killed billions of innocent people. Today we make them pay for every life they've taken. The battle was fierce and brutal. Fourth bioships fought desperately to protect their breeding grounds. But they were facing something they had never encountered before. A united galaxy that refused to give up. Human-trained alien forces stormed the surface of the breeding world. They used explosives and fire to destroy Vorth nurseries, ensuring that no new warriors would emerge from this place. It was harsh but necessary. When the battle ended, an entire Vorth breeding world was destroyed. More importantly, dozens of alien species had worked together successfully for the first time in centuries. General Kyung-ho received the victory report at his base on New Silla. Around him, human and alien soldiers celebrated together. They had proven that the galaxy could fight back. "Sir," Colonel Sungman said, "we're receiving requests for military advisors from every liberated system. Everyone wants to learn human fighting methods." Kyung-ho smiled. "Then we'll teach them. Every species that wants to fight for freedom will learn how to win." Outside his office, the mixed training units continued their exercises. Humans and aliens working side by side, preparing for the battles ahead. The war was far from over, but now the galaxy had hope. And hope, as humans had always known, was the most powerful weapon of all. Fleet Admiral Wu Jin stood on the bridge of the TDF Seoul, looking at the largest star map he had ever seen. Red dots marked 50 Vorth-occupied systems that would be attacked simultaneously in just 6 hours. It was the biggest military operation in galactic history. 6 months had passed since humanity first arrived to help the galaxy. What started as a desperate rescue mission had become a full-scale war of liberation. Human tactics and determination had spread to every surviving species. "Admiral, all fleet commanders are reporting ready," said his aide, Captain Haewan. "Every species in the Alliance has ships in position." Wu Jin nodded. The operation was called Galaxy's Dawn, and it would either break the Vorth swarm forever or destroy what remained of galactic civilization. There was no middle ground. On the planet below, Dr. Mi Young worked frantically in her laboratory. Her research had revealed disturbing truths about the Vorth that changed everything. These creatures weren't evil conquerors. They were refugees running from something even worse. "General Kyung-ho, you need to see this," she called to the military commander who was visiting her lab. Mi Young showed him brain scans from captured Vorth specimens. "Look at these neural patterns. The Vorth have memories of their original homeworld. They were once a peaceful species, living in harmony with their environment." Kyung-ho studied the data carefully. "What happened to them?" "Something attacked their galaxy," Mi Young explained. "Something that destroyed entire star systems. The Vorth collective consciousness formed as a survival mechanism. They consumed other species not from evil, but from desperate hunger." This revelation was troubling. If the Vorth were refugees, what were they running from? And why hadn't anyone in the galaxy known about this greater threat? Meanwhile, Captain Haewan prepared her assault fleet for the attack on Meridian Cluster. Her ships carried a new weapon that humans had developed, psychological warfare on a massive scale. "Remember, we're not just fighting the Vorth," she told her crew. "We're fighting for the minds of millions of enslaved beings on those worlds below." Her fleet included converted cargo ships equipped with powerful broadcast equipment. They would transmit human music, poetry, and messages of hope in hundreds of languages. The goal was to remind enslaved populations that freedom still existed. The battle for Meridian Prime began at dawn local time. Haewan's ships fought their way through Vorth bioship defenses while broadcasting messages of liberation to the planet below. "People of Meridian Prime, this is Captain Haewan of the Terran Defense Fleet." Her voice echoed across the planet's surface. "Hold on just a little longer. Freedom is coming." On the planet's surface, Sergeant Major Yan Su led a dangerous mission. His team had to board a massive Vorth bioship and plant explosives at its core. The plan was crazy, but humans specialized in crazy plans. "Remember, these things are basically giant insects," Yan Su told his soldiers as they prepared to board the enemy vessel. "Find the nerve center and destroy it. The whole ship will stop functioning." The boarding action was unlike anything in military history. Human soldiers used magnetic boots and cutting torches to fight their way through the living corridors of the bioship. The walls themselves tried to fight back, growing spikes and releasing toxic gases. But humans were stubborn. They kept pushing forward step by step until they reached the creature's brain. The explosion that followed destroyed a ship the size of a city. Across the galaxy, similar battles were taking place. Human-trained alien forces used guerrilla tactics to liberate world after world. The Vorth, for the first time in centuries, were losing ground everywhere. But the enemy was adapting. New types of bioships appeared, specifically designed to counter human weapons and tactics. The Vorth collective mind was learning from every defeat. Even worse, Dr. Mi-Young's research team made a horrifying discovery. Captured humans were being used in Vorth experiments. The enemy was trying to create hybrid creatures that combined human creativity with Vorth collective consciousness. They're making human-Vorth hybrids. Mi-Young reported to Fleet Admiral Wu Jin during an emergency briefing. These creatures think like humans but have no individual will. They could be incredibly dangerous. The first encounter with these hybrids came during the liberation of the Thornaki homeworld. Admiral Park, now commanding a combined human-alien fleet, faced enemies that used human tactics but fought with perfect coordination. These aren't normal Vorth, Park observed as he watched the battle unfold. They're using our own strategies against us. The hybrid Vorth fought with human-style aggression, but without human emotion or individual decision-making. They were like human soldiers controlled by a computer, efficient and ruthless. The battle was the bloodiest yet. Human ships that tried their usual surprise attacks found themselves anticipated and countered. Alien forces using human tactics met enemies who knew those same tactics perfectly. Victory came only through tremendous sacrifice. Thousands of ships were lost and tens of thousands of soldiers died. But the Thornaki homeworld was liberated, proving that even the Vorth's ultimate adaptation could be overcome. On a liberated world called New Sol, young refugees who had grown up in human schools were developing their own ideas about fighting the war. These alien children, educated in human-style thinking, saw possibilities that adults missed. Tai Hoon was a young Vellani who had spent 2 years in human schools. His crystal-like body glowed with excitement as he explained his idea to General Kyung Ho. The Vorth collective mind is like a giant computer network, the boy said. But what if we could talk to individual Vorth creatures directly? What if we could help them remember who they were before the collective took control? It was a revolutionary idea. Instead of just fighting the Vorth, they might be able to free them from their own collective consciousness. Tae-hoon and other hybrid-educated children began working on telepathic techniques to reach individual Vorth minds. Meanwhile, deep space scouts brought troubling news. The Vorth were pulling back from dozens of systems, concentrating their forces in the galactic core. Something big was coming. They're massing at the Prime Cluster, reported Captain So-young during a strategy meeting. Every Vorth bioship in the galaxy seems to be heading there. Fleet Admiral Wu Jin studied the intelligence reports. The Prime Cluster contained the oldest Vorth breeding worlds, the heart of their entire civilization. If they were gathering there, it could only mean one thing. They're preparing for a final battle, he concluded. Everything they have in one last fight to determine the future of the galaxy. President Yoon-ji received the news on Earth, where millions of humans were volunteering for military service. The war had united her planet like nothing before in history. My fellow humans, she announced in a global broadcast, the decisive battle approaches. Everything we fought for, everything we believe in will be tested in the days ahead. She paused, looking directly into the camera. But I have faith in what we can accomplish when we work together. We've already proven that hope can triumph over despair. Now we must prove it one final time. Across human space, colony ships were being converted into warships. Civilian volunteers trained with military equipment. Even children too young to fight contributed by building supplies and equipment. The galaxy was preparing for the largest battle in its history. On one side stood the Vorth swarm, ancient and desperate, fighting for survival. On the other stood a united coalition of species, led by humans who refused to accept defeat. Fleet Admiral Wu Jin looked out at the stars and thought about the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, humans didn't even know other intelligent species existed. Now they were leading a galactic war against extinction itself. All fleet commanders, prepare your ships, he ordered. In 72 hours, we attack the Prime Cluster. This is our chance to end the war and bring peace to the galaxy. The final battle would determine whether hope or hunger ruled the stars. Admiral Park stood on the observation deck of the TDF Terra Nova, humanity's first purpose-built dreadnought. Around him, the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for Operation Sunrise. The final assault on the Vorth Prime Cluster, 1. Year had passed since the first human ships dropped from hyperspace to help a dying galaxy. Now representatives from every surviving species stood together, united by human leadership and determination. Final status report, Park requested from his command staff. Captain So Young approached with her data pad. All fleet elements report ready, sir. We have 12 million ships from 47 different species. The Vorth are defending with an estimated 15 million bioships. The numbers were close, but Park knew this battle wouldn't be won by counting ships. It would be won by the thing that had carried humanity through every impossible situation, the refusal to give up. On the flagship's science deck, Dr. Mi Young put the finishing touches on her greatest creation. It wasn't a weapon designed to kill, but something far more revolutionary, a biological agent that could disrupt Vorth collective consciousness without destroying the individual creatures. Are you sure this will work? Asked General Kyung-ho, who had arrived to oversee the final preparations. Mi Young nodded confidently. We've tested it on captured specimens. The agent breaks down the bioelectrical connections that bind individual Vorth to their collective mind. They become themselves again, able to think and choose independently. It was a radical plan. Instead of destroying the Vorth swarm, they would liberate it. Every creature would be freed from the collective consciousness that had turned them into mindless consumers. On planets throughout human space, the families of soldiers watched news broadcasts showing the massive fleet gathering at the edge of Vorth territory. President Yoon-ji appeared on screens across Earth, her voice steady and reassuring. Today, our sons and daughters carry not just human hopes, but the dreams of an entire galaxy, she said. They fight not for conquest, but for the right of every intelligent being to think freely and choose their own destiny. The battle began at the outer edge of the Prime Cluster. Vorth bioships, larger and more numerous than ever before, formed defensive lines around their ancient breeding worlds. These were creatures that had lived for centuries, the original architects of the swarm. Commander Jin Woo, grandson of the war's first martyr Jin Ai, led his fighter squadron through the opening attack. His ships carried the new consciousness-disrupting weapons that Dr. Mi Young had developed. Remember what we're fighting for, Jin Woo told his pilots. Not just victory, but the chance to turn enemies into friends. Every Vorth we free is one more ally in building a better galaxy. The space battle was unlike anything seen before. Ships from dozens of species fought side by side, using human tactics but adapted for their own unique abilities. Falani energy weapons fired in coordinated patterns. Thornaki stealth ships struck from impossible angles. Zephyrian warriors boarded enemy vessels in glorious displays of courage. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Young Tai-hoon and his group of hybrid-educated alien children had been working on telepathic contact with individual Vorth creatures. Their research had finally succeeded. Admiral Park, Tai-hoon's voice came over the communication system from his position on a nearby science vessel. We're making contact with individual Vorth minds. They're still in there, trapped inside the collective consciousness. Through their telepathic abilities, the young aliens were reaching past the swarm's group mind to touch the individual personalities hidden underneath. What they found shocked everyone. The Vorth remembered who they had been before the collective formed. They remembered their home galaxy being destroyed by something terrible. They remembered the desperate decision to merge their minds together for survival. And they remembered the guilt of consuming other species to feed their endless hunger. They want to be free, Tai-hoon reported. They're tired of being prisoners in their own minds. They want to stop killing and start living again. This changed everything. Admiral Park immediately ordered the deployment of Dr. Mi Young's consciousness-disrupting weapon. Instead of using it as a last resort, it became the primary strategy. Specially equipped human ships moved through the battle, releasing clouds of the biological agent. Wherever it spread, Vorth bioships began to change. The perfect coordination that had made them so dangerous started to break down. Individual Vorth creatures began acting on their own for the first time in centuries. Some continued fighting out of habit, but others simply stopped moving, overwhelmed by the return of individual thought and emotion. On the surface of the main breeding world, General Kyung-ho led the largest ground assault in galactic history. Millions of soldiers from every species fought their way through Vorth defensive positions. But their goal wasn't destruction. It was liberation. Medical teams forward, Kyung-ho ordered as more and more Vorth creatures began showing signs of individual consciousness. These beings are going to need help adjusting to freedom. The battle raged for 3 days. Gradually, the tide turned as more Vorth broke free from their collective programming. Some joined the attacking forces, desperate to help liberate their fellow creatures. Others simply collapsed, unable to cope with sudden individual awareness after centuries of group consciousness. President Yoonji made the decision that would define humanity's legacy in the galaxy. When reports came in of billions of newly conscious Vorth needing food, shelter, and medical care, she immediately ordered Earth's entire relief fleet to the Prime Cluster. "We came here to end a war," she announced, "but we're staying to help heal the wounded. Every being in this galaxy deserves a chance at peace and happiness." The war ended not with a massive explosion, but with the largest refugee crisis in galactic history. Billions of former Vorth, freed from collective consciousness, had to learn how to be individuals again. Human colony ships, originally designed for military conquest, became relief vessels carrying food, medicine, and hope to devastated worlds. Admiral Park found himself managing not a military operation, but a humanitarian mission on an unprecedented scale. Former enemies worked side by side to rebuild destroyed civilizations and care for traumatized survivors. On a small farming world called New Earth, Park retired from military service to help establish agricultural communes where humans and former Vorth worked together in the fields. The sight of deadly bio-warriors learning to grow crops became a symbol of the galaxy's transformation. Commander Taemin, the Vellani officer who had first greeted the human fleet, now served as ambassador to the reformed Galactic Council. Working with human diplomats, he helped draft the new charter, a constitution based on individual freedom and collective responsibility. "The humans taught us something important," Taemin said during the charter's signing ceremony. "Hope is not just believing things will get better. Hope is the willingness to work and fight and sacrifice to make things better," Dr. Mi Young established research centers throughout the galaxy where human and alien scientists work together to heal the psychological wounds left by centuries of war. Her consciousness restoration techniques helped millions of former Vorth adjust to individual life. The galaxy had changed completely. Where once there had been isolated civilizations fighting a hopeless war against extinction, now there was a united community dedicated to peaceful cooperation and mutual aid. But the transformation wasn't complete. Deep space monitoring stations began detecting signals from another galaxy, familiar patterns of distress calls from civilizations under attack by an unknown enemy. On Earth, now serving as the unofficial capital of galactic civilization, Fleet Admiral Wu Jin studied the incoming transmissions. The messages were desperate pleas for help, broadcast into space by dying civilizations. "It's starting again somewhere else," he told President Yoonji during an emergency meeting. "Another galaxy needs help." President Yoonji looked out at the stars, where human ships and former Vorth vessels patrolled together, protecting trade routes and delivering aid to developing worlds. "Then we'll help them," she said simply. "That's what we do." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Volunteers from every species offered to join a new expedition to the distant galaxy. Humans, Vellani, Thornaki, Zephyrians, and even former Vorth worked together to build the largest fleet ever assembled. But this time they weren't going as conquerors or warriors. They were going as teachers, healers, and friends. The ships they built carried not just weapons, but hospitals, schools, agricultural equipment, and everything needed to help civilizations rebuild. Admiral Park, called out of retirement one final time, stood on the bridge of the expedition flagship as it prepared to depart. Around him, representatives from 100 species worked at their stations, united by the human ideals of hope and determination. "This is Admiral Park to all expedition vessels," he broadcast to the massive fleet. "Our mission is simple. Somewhere out there, people are afraid and alone, fighting a war they think they cannot win. We're going to prove them wrong." The fleet jumped into hyperspace, carrying the message that had saved their own galaxy. When all hope fades, help will come from the sky. Behind them, the Milky Way galaxy continued its transformation. On 1,000 worlds,